Thank you for coming to the board and community meeting. We're gonna basically do like a history, a look back, a celebrate, and then a look ahead. We're gonna do brief history. So I'm not gonna tell all the stories, but at least like some very highlighted things from the Sayers, Rails Bridge, School Factory, Bridge Foundry, and then we're gonna talk about our Q4 and Q1 OKRs, our call to action. At the end, we'll have a good 30 minutes or so for anybody who wants to just hang out on the Zoom call and catch up because it's been a while since many of us have talked in person. All right, so hi, my name is Desi. I am a software developer, have been for about 20 some plus years. And right now I am an engineering manager at MetaMask. Most people know that as a non-custodial wallet. If you're into blockchain stuff or want to talk about it, I'm happy to. I've been involved with Rails Bridge, Bridge Foundry since about 2010. Took a big hiatus in the middle there, which I'll mention later. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us. All right, so I figure you can't have one of these talks without talking about the Sayers, so you need to go over the origin story at least a little bit. A lot of people already know this story, but there are some new faces on the call, so I just want to make sure that everybody does. So these are the Sarahs. Sarah Allen on the left, who is on the call with us today. Sarah May on the right, who I don't believe is on the call, but she might at some point show up. Who knows? Essentially what happened is in 2009, the Sarahs went to some Ruby meetups and realized that there's pretty low representation of women at these meetups. Somewhere around 3%, and in the San Francisco Bay Area, there were probably around 20% women developers. So the Sarahs were like, we can probably fix this. And so they came up with the idea to create workshops to basically teach women the tech so that they would feel more comfortable coming into the community and being a part of the community. It was wildly successful and it caught on and then eventually turned into Rails Bridge, which is where, most of us sort of start to come into the organization. So, or at least a lot of us did. The way that they made sure that women were coming to these workshops, and it wasn't just, workshops of men, was that they required that all men come as a guest of a woman, which I believe they originally took that from Women 2.0. Sarah can correct me if not. Cool. So after that, we get to what I call the Rails Bridge era. This is the time frame between 2009 and 2013. So basically during this time, it was primarily Rails Bridge. There was a JavaScript and CSS workshop, but most of the workshops that were going on, were all around Rails Bridge. During this time, so they had the first workshops in 2009. And like I said, they were wildly successful and people out in the world started hearing about them, people like me. And people like me were like, oh, I want to do that. So in the beginning, there wasn't like a, full-blown curriculum or a how-to or like anything that sort of told you how to do it. So the Sarahs actually put on a workshop while I was in town so that I could learn from them. And then I basically went and like did it everywhere. And I think lots of people did that, right? Like lots of people were like, okay, I've been to one, I got instructed on how to do this, and now I'm going to do this everywhere I go. I think for me, between 2010 and 2015, I ran 12 workshops, and I think I did them in 6 different cities. I went back to the meetups and like looked at all the places, and like basically anywhere I went, I tried to do one. So what ended up happening is that these things started popping up all over the place. So they were in San Francisco, Boulder, Denver, Chicago, New York, Colima, Mexico, like anywhere that people were going, these things were popping up, and it was amazing. It was a really beautiful thing. It was exhausting, but it was also probably a period of time that I'm like most proud of. And I got a lot out of it during that time. So I thought it might be cool if there are other people who are from sort of like their beginnings started around this time. If you would like to share sort of like how you got here, please feel free to come off mute and tell your story. Maybe just a couple minutes. Is anybody feeling like sharing?
I can do that.
Thanks, Fer.
Let me start my camera. Yep. Hello. Fer here from Guadalajara, Mexico. I learned about Rails Bridge. At that time when Desi went to Colima, Mexico, a very small city, and I was working for the company that hosted the event, and I applied for being a teacher assistant. And we love the project because we have pretty much the same issue in Mexico, and especially there because it's like a very small city. So the first effort that we did, it's like, okay, what if we translate these resources into Spanish? Because that's also a barrier that we have. Like, okay, most people don't speak English, so probably it's a good use of our time to translate all the resources. And we did a first time. But we didn't have like a way to do it, so we did like our own fork for, at that time, Codificadas community. And we still have the fork that's kind of outdated. I think it's still in Rails 4. So long story short, I joined Thoughtbot 2 years ago. And part of the efforts that I'm trying to do, it's resuming that and trying to restructure the curricular repo to add translations easier. So instead of each language having a fork, just having everything like partials and using a localized service. So we can just, okay, I want to add support for, I don't know, Portuguese. Okay, just go to localize, clone the guidelines, and just translate everything. And then we can just do small changes in the repo. And in theory, that should make everything work on other languages. So yeah, that's how we got here.
Nice. Nice. You and Melissa should probably talk because I think they're working on the curriculum too, which is awesome. So cool. Thank you for sharing. Is there anybody else who wants to share?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. And actually, Fer and I have actually interacted in the Rails Bridge channel about the translation stuff that he did more recently. So thank you so much for helping out with that and picking that up again. So I got involved with Rails Bridge back in 2013, more specifically for the Boston chapter. I actually used to work at Thoughtbot. I was an apprentice at the time, and my mentor had asked me if I was interested in volunteering at a free coding workshop for underrepresented folks in tech, or at least back then I think it was just for women. Eventually we expanded a bit. That workshop that I helped out at the Install Fest, and then the next day it was closed either due to like a blizzard or some incident on the MIT campus, which was very unfortunate. But I was still very inspired by the environment and by even just the Install Fest and the vibes of the whole thing. And so I decided to be an actual volunteer, started helping out with fundraising efforts and being a TA, presented and emceed a few times. Fast forward a few years later, I started helping with the broader Rails Bridge efforts and joined the board for that, and helping other chapters get funding and manage their funds. A couple of years later, I think it was like 2017, 2018, I joined the Bridge Foundry board, which I'm still on right now. I'm treasurer, and really just kind of helping out, helping chapters and communities and bridges out all over the world, I guess, and for all different sorts of tech, which is really exciting. So yeah, I've been at this for a decade now, which is crazy. But it's really cool how the community has grown, and Boston has has grown to have a really great network where I can just kind of step away and have it do its own thing. And excitingly, we actually have our first workshop in a month from today, since the pandemic. So yeah, super excited about that. And that's my story.
Thanks, Melissa. Well, cool. Thank you too for sharing that. I didn't want to be the only one talking on this day. So
I think Emily was going to say something.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, I can keep it short. I found out about Rails Bridge through, I believe, Rachel Myers, who was someone who helped organize in the early days. And Rachel Myers and I worked together, and we had this sort of relationship where we would like argue about stuff all the time. And of course, like she had lots of opinions about how to like teach people Ruby on Rails well. And so she sort of pulled me in. She was like, "Come argue with me at these; it'll be even more fun." And she was right. And I'm sort of also a self-taught developer, and I came up sort of before there were boot camps and before there was Railsbridge, and just like felt this like desperate need for this thing and got really excited about it. So I helped organize some workshops and actually ended up writing the front end curriculum back in the day when that was a thing, and have sort of been hanging around ever since. At one point, I started to try to start like an ops flavor of workshop, and that did not really take off, but I still think it was a cool idea.
I also still think it's a cool idea. So thank you for sharing.
Actually, KF is very interested in an ops workshop, so
Ooh,
we
nice.
should connect after this.
Well, thank you all again for sharing. Like I said, I didn't want it to be just me. So the next era is sort of the Bridge Foundry and School Factory era. One thing I forgot to mention in the last slide is essentially in the, like the 2009 to 2013, there were lots of things that were put in place. So like the curriculum was put in place, the code of conduct, the cookbook, lots of things were created that made it much easier for people to be able to take this sort of template for how to go out and organize these workshops. So in 2013 up to 2017, that started to sort of expand, right? So we started having different technologies. So we started getting Closure Bridge and Mobile Bridge and Go Bridge and Elixir Bridge. Like all of these different bridges started to pop up during this time frame. Additionally, during this time frame, in order to support the growth that was happening, Sarah and probably others who I don't know all the names of were trying to figure out a way to, like, how do we continue to scale the support to all of these different groups, all of these different bridges. So it became apparent that a 501c3 would be the next step because we needed to be able to be a nonprofit in order to do that. So in talking to a number of people, Sarah discovered that it might be prudent to investigate working with someone as a fiscal sponsor, someone like School Factory. The main idea is that you basically have someone who does all the, 501c3-ish type stuff for signing and things of that nature, but you still get to act as a 501c3. The important thing there is to make sure that you're aligned well with whatever organization that you sign up with to be your fiscal sponsor. And for the most part, School Factory was. There were a few things that came up over the years, mainly because the way that we organize is very different than how a lot of other organizations organize. We're much more grassroots. We have lots of different diverse ideas and practices, and the way that we do things aren't always exactly the same. That's kind of like our power move. And that doesn't always quite jive with, how other nonprofits in the world run. For the most part, though, School Factory was well aligned, and they always did find a way to make things work. But that's kind of how the School Factory era kind of came into play. During this time, we also needed to create a board. So this is when our board came into existence. Our first board was Bridget Hillier, Sarah May, Rachel Myers, and Sarah Allen. I got that right, Sarah Allen?
That was the program board.
The program board,
So
right?
there was a program board under School Factory because they had a board of directors. And if you're fiscally sponsored, you don't have a board of directors. So I don't actually remember it. That sounds right.
Yeah.
Bridget Hillier started Closure Bridge. And I'll just chime in the names. Bridge Foundry was, we were trying to come up with something that would have bridge in it and some other words to describe all the bridges. And Sarah May came up with Foundry, because in a foundry, you make things that are each unique.
Yes.
And unlike a factory where you stamp things out that are all the same. So each of the bridges is unique and different from each other. And so that's why we all decided that Bridge Foundry was a good name.
Thank you. I am so glad you said that. I didn't find that in a document anywhere. I did dig through a lot of documents. So thanks for that little bit of history. So this was pretty important because this was the first time that we had sort of like this board type scenario. All right, so big love to all of those people. Let's just shout out some love there. Thank you all. Now that I'm done with that, I felt like I had to throw in at least a couple of, gifts on this presentation. All right, so School Factory continued. One other thing, I belatedly realized that School Factory is 2 words, not 1. So you'll see it periodically in here incorrectly, but sorry. Okay, so as part of all of this, they did a lot of work. So there were 3 big things that happened during this period. So there was a very big exercise done around brand visioning. We came up with our theory of change, and it was sort of the baseline and start of the strategic plan. So let's talk about brand visioning just a little bit. Most people think about brand visioning as like logos, colors, that sort of stuff. But for us, it was much, much bigger than that. There was tons of work that went into this. There were lots of surveys that were done to try and make sure that everyone across all our bridges and chapters, were being included, and that the visioning of our, like, what our voice and our tone was representative of the very diverse group of volunteers and organizations that we had under us. So this was no easy exercise. The next thing that they had to come up with was the theory of change. And I didn't know what a theory of change was. And Sarah admitted she also didn't know what a theory of change was when she first started out. It's basically what big thing in the world do you see happening? It's an illustration and a description. So what we learned in doing our theory of change was that we went from, having a theory of change of, if you teach women the tech, they will come into the community, to realizing that we actually needed to do a culture shift. So in order to create culture change in the tech industry, so that it's diverse, that was more of our theory of change. I wrote it down there. Let me just create culture change in the tech industry, so that diverse teams are common and considered to be normal. And in order to do this, we needed to have a culture shift. Like this was much bigger and a much grander dream. And then last but not least is the strategic plan. And we're going to talk a lot more about the strategic plan as we move forward. So first, let's talk about what came out of those first 2 things, which is our vision and our mission. Our vision is a technology industry where diversity is the norm. So a vision should be something that like evokes emotion. It should feel like inspiring. And I think ours does a really good job of that. It's bold, it's hard, and it's worth it. So I think that everyone who worked on this did an amazing job, and it feels right to me. Our mission is more about what's our purpose and our direction, like the how. So if we kind of go through ours, to transform tech culture, that's our purpose, by generating leaders, teachers, and mentors, our how-to, our direction, who empower the underserved, again, purpose. So I think that this mission describes what we do in a pretty amazing way. And it doesn't constrain us either. So I'd like to give an example of like this mission and how it kind of plays out, or like an example of something where our mission plays out. Women and people in the BIPOC community typically do volunteering for philanthropic reasons. They do it because they want to help people. They're not coming at it from the point of view of, I'm doing this to get something out of it. They're doing it because they want to help other people. But incidentally, by helping other people in the way that we do things, they end up helping themselves too. Most of the time, they don't really realize it, but that is an outcome of what happens. They're being empowered. So when you're teaching a workshop, you're solidifying your skills, you're building confidence. When you're volunteering on a board, you're gaining leadership skills. When you're going out to like figure out how to get a space for a workshop, you're building a network. It really does play into sort of growing people. And I just wanted to kind of give an example of that. So I'm kind of wondering if anybody's on the call who was around during the time this is my like gap time. Like I was pretty absent during the time that this work was being done. I wasn't around for any of the brand visioning or the theory of change stuff. So if anybody was around who would like to just kind of give a little bit of a history from your point of view, that would be great. And it doesn't have to be Sarah. Yeah.
It might be
why-
just me.
All right, well, you give your color, Sarah.
So we actually went into the branding thing only wanting a logo. Like we were like, we want a logo. We want the website to look good. And I didn't know how to do that. And all the designers I talked to would say, so what is your message? And I didn't have something that I felt comfortable coming up with, because I didn't feel like I could represent all the different people. So it revealed itself over time to become this incredibly powerful group process. And the tagline and a lot of the copy on the website were things that the brand designer that we were working with pulled out of conversations with the volunteers and these workshops. And it was just incredible, because I was like, wow, that is brilliant. And she was like, oh, so-and-so said that. Oh, you said that. And I had no idea. And then the theory of change was the same way. It was a requirement of our being fiscally sponsored by School Factory. And I had to learn what a theory of change is before we could accept that requirement. And I still didn't really understand it. And then the James Carlson, who was the director of School Factory, helped us come up with that through a workshop. So this whole process was, a bunch of us learning, like, what are these words? What do they mean? And then they became really powerful things.
Yeah.
And the strategic plan actually came from, I went to someone who I know who is on a lot of boards. And I said, how do you do fundraising at this bigger level? We've only done primarily workshop fundraising, right? Event fundraising. And, it's hard to get to that bigger level. And he's like, oh, you need a strategic plan. And I was like, how do I do that? And he sent me a couple of copies of different strategic plans. And I was like, that's going to take me like 6 months. He was like, you should be able to do it in a few hours. And then that was my big realization that, oh, there are other people who have these skills. And so I recruited Elin, who was then working as a product manager and has a background in engineering, was at the very first workshop. And she, I think it took more than a few hours, but writing it up was not hard for her. Aligning the team was what was challenging. And then that has been a really powerful thing for us all to like work effectively together.
Thank you, Sarah. Bridge Foundry, why? So the upshot of why we had to do Bridge Foundry is that School Factory basically ceased to exist, or they shut down, something along those lines. And as we talked about earlier, finding a fiscal sponsor who aligns well with your mission is pretty difficult. So it was decided, all right, well, I guess we're going to be a 501c3 of our own. So that's how that happened. Okay, so what exactly is Bridge Foundry? So I know, as someone who came up during the Rails Bridge era, for me, when I came back into things, Bridge Foundry was basically a parent I could ask for money if I didn't really have a way to get it myself. In the last 2 years, I've really come to understand that it's so much more than that, though. It can and is so much more than that. Bridge Foundry is a force multiplier. So it has an ecosystem of volunteers. We have resources and money, and we can scale in ways that are just not possible otherwise. So like bridges can't scale quite the same. But if you have like this organization that you can draw from for tools, support, advice, legal help, etc., you can really do so much more. So it allows everything in our ecosystem, our bridges, our chapters, our programs, to scale in a way that they couldn't possibly scale before. And it doesn't have to be just workshops. Even though that's kind of what we're known for, that's not the only thing that we can do or do across our different bridges and programs and chapters. We've had scholarships for conferences, we've given out grants, we've got tools and expertise that we've provided to outside organizations that jive well with our mission. We have research projects. There's tons of different stuff. And I just want people to understand that Bridge Foundry really does have a lot to give in so many different ways. And it's definitely not money, but there's tons of others. Okay, so that's the dream, right? To create a sustainable organization that can support our mission by supporting our programs, chapters, bridges, as well as outside communities or organizations that vibe with our mission and goals. That's the dream of Bridge Foundry. All right, so strategic plan. I know we talked about it earlier, but we're going to be going really fast now. So building a resilient organization was sort of the first big thing that we needed to do. This included staffing and leadership development, and it included inclusion training. We'll talk about all of these a little bit more in a minute. Thought leadership was the second thing that was important. Brand development and communication to stakeholders are the two other things. So these were listed in priority order. There's a really good document that sort of like talks through all of this that is in our Google Drive. And I've linked it in this doc in 2 different places. So if anybody's interested, I think it's a really good read. It's not hard to read and it lays everything out really well. So resiliency. Anytime you have organizations with an all volunteer staff, things change in people's lives, right? Like people have families, they get new jobs, they start companies, they, move. There's any number of things that could disrupt, leadership of a given program or board or bridge. So in order to make sure that there's some continuity, we needed to, recruit additional members for the board, create onboarding processes. We needed better tools to support, our volunteers and to help them organize future efforts, because otherwise there's institutional knowledge that gets left every time a leader leaves. Like my own personal onboarding, I think it's taken me probably 2 years and I still don't feel like I have it all. And these are all things that we still need to keep working on. And then the last thing was establish an ongoing fundraising capability that lets us maintain 1 year of reserve for baseline. I think a lot of progress had been made on this, and then COVID kind of set things back. So we gotta start over with this. So where we're at, we recruited new board members. We made Zoom accounts available for bridges to run virtual events during the pandemic. We set up financial software for bridges to manage their budgets and corporate cards. And then there's some things that we didn't get to. So standardizing the onboarding process, like I said, creating a self-serve financial system that makes it easy for people to use and follow, and then engage more individuals with the board. We did make some progress on this, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's still a work in progress. So inclusion training. Our volunteers and a majority of tech workers needed to learn this, and we need to eliminate disrespectful behavior in the technology teams. So where did we get on this? So the initial training was created and it was piloted with 2 groups of the workshop volunteers. We still need more volunteers and we need independent research to verify this training. So basically there's been some cases where it has been proven that certain inclusion trainings, not all inclusion trainings, can do more harm than good. And we don't want that to be the case with anything that we do. So we want to make sure that we have an independent researcher who can, make sure that anything that we are creating and putting out into the world doesn't do harm. One of the original hopeful benefits of doing inclusion training was that we could potentially do it at corporations and have leaders be able to have this be something that their teams did, and it would be a potential source of income that would help support the organization as a whole. And anything that we do create, we need it to be replicatable. All right, so thought leadership. So Bridge Foundry has deep knowledge in research and practices of diversity and inclusion. And we could increase awareness of workplace challenges and opportunities. So in the past, blog posts and conference talks have been very well received and beneficial and have had a pretty big impact on things. So this was something that we really wanted to lean into as an organization. The way that kind of played out is that there was a research project that was started around systemic bias. That project actually had a lot of traction. The research project was defined in collaboration with independent researchers. Independent researcher defined the questions and conducted interviews. We updated our policies to make sure that we were protecting people's PII around these interviews. And there was a team of volunteers who were going through and sort of trying to coalesce the findings. We still need more volunteers to push this through to completion. It got a little bit stalled due to some health issues for Sarah. And the fundraising just wasn't sufficient. So our researcher had to move on, and we didn't have the money to continue working with the research firm. I think this is something that we're hoping does play out in our next strategic 3-year plan. But we'll just have to see what the community helps us decide on. But this has had a fair amount of work done on, and I think that it would be a very valuable report and piece of research and evidence for people in the industry. All right, so brand development, back to what we were talking about earlier, and why it was on the list again, even though they had done all this work already, is that we really wanted to make sure that different regions and different technology focused chapters of Bridges, that everyone's diverse ideas and practices were sort of being encapsulated in the brand, and that people felt included, that all of our chapters and all of our bridges and all of our programs felt included in our shared vision and voice, and more work needed to be done to get us to that point. Also, we needed to expand fundraising for ongoing and new initiatives, and that meant we needed a new identity and messaging package so that our sponsors and our volunteers understood what that shared vision was and the thing that kind of connected between all of us. And this is still, a work in progress too. So what did we get through? So the visioning workshops were done, the theory of change, branding work for messaging, logo design, website design, presentation design. But there was still quite a bit of stuff that needed to happen around brand guidelines. Those were incomplete, they weren't easy to find, and they weren't very shareable. And then presentation templates. So again, all of these things would help people be able to understand and really internalize the shared voice and vision and sort of the commonality among us, while also embracing our differences too. Communication to stakeholders. Bridge Foundry's Bridges chapters all operate independently, and the option of having a loose affiliation allows for more innovation and viral growth. Like I said earlier, this is sort of like our superpower. This is one of the things that makes us as awesome as we are. So more effort is needed to create like a shared understanding for the org and around our shared resources, and to create more resiliency. Some of the things that were done in this area were some one-off reports were written for big sponsors if they were needed. In 2018, there was a huge media event, job posting. I don't remember what this one was.
That was so that we could hire somebody on contract to do regular updates that we would send out to sponsors about what everyone was doing. And we did this per job post, and we got like 0 applicants.
Gotcha.
And so I think I certainly did not know how to, and still struggle with recruiting people who have a skill set that doesn't appear on an engineering team.
Gotcha. Thanks. We expanded the advisory board. We did some newsletters and some blog posts. And then we have drafted the 2023 annual report in conjunction with the 2022 one. Some things that we still need to do are the impact report, consistent communication to volunteers, sponsors, and the general public, And then that 2018 media list hasn't been kept up to date, and we haven't had a lot in the way of news to report. So again, all things that are still need to be worked on if we choose to continue working on this. So strategic plan continued. So as part of the resiliency piece, I just wanted to call out that there were a few more things that we did. I joined as chair in May of 2022. Kinsey joined as secretary in September of 2022. Melissa has been continuing to document finance and working on that ecosystem of self-serve finance. And we all created board committees to be able to create focus and allow us for like a greater number of folks to participate in the board. In the area of thought leadership, I do want to call out that Sarah Allen did continue working on the systemic bias work, and I think she would still be working on it now if it was like the thing that we bubbled as our top priority, and probably still is secretly working on it if I had to guess. So taking a minute to just sort of step back, I haven't mentioned COVID hardly at all on this call, maybe not at all, I'm not sure. But that thing happened, and you know, it did a number on us. So most of our workshops have completely halted, with the exception of Go Bridge. One second. Things got out of date. Bridge Troll, you know, doesn't work, and the curriculums are out of date. We have few volunteers right now, with the exception of Go Bridge, and Rails Bridge is picking back up now too. Our board is small. We're not sure what the mindset change is yet with regard to in-person workshops and how people feel about that now. You know, maybe we need to change some things. And then fundraising has been all Go Bridge for the most part recently. So the board got together and was like, all right, we need to like get ourselves moving and get some focus for like the right now stuff, the stuff we have to do now. So we created OKRs for Q4 and Q1. So we've got two objectives. I don't know how many people are used to this format, but we basically have two objectives for Q4 and Q1, and only Q4 and Q1. So our first objective is to increase volunteer-led activities that further the mission. So support and grow active bridges from 1 to 3. We have Go Bridge right now is, you know, considered an active bridge, and Rails Bridge is in the process of like kicking back up. The first bridge that I know of for Rails Bridge since the pandemic, that's the one that Melissa and the team out of Boston have been working on and are having in a month. So they've been redoing the curriculum and making sure that the curriculum's all up to date. So we're getting there. So we need to kind of help one more and help Go Bridge and Rails Bridge, you know, kind of continue getting all of their activity back up. The second key result is active Bridge Foundry board committees. So we actually have 6 committees, I think, and we're only focusing on these 3: communication, finance, and governance, because those are the ones that we feel like support this particular objective. Getting things up and running with these 3 committees will help us be able to increase volunteer-led activities. So that's why that one is so specific to that. And then complete 90% of the tasks needed to create a self-serve financial system. Again, this will support getting volunteer-led activities going again by providing a way for people to get access to the funds they need, get access to the supports they need, etc. Objective 2 is to increase sponsorship to support activities that further the mission. And this one is sort of going into that one that it mentioned earlier about sort of like building our fundraising abilities. I haven't engaged with any of the sponsors recently, and I feel like this is something that we really need to get back into doing. I feel like this is, yeah, it's pretty critical, right? Like we do need to get some funding going. So all of this is sort of around that, making sure that we have some funds coming in to support not only Bridge Foundry, but like covering all of the various tools and stuff that we use, but also being able to fund our bridges and chapters and programs to do activities. So again, it's going back to the activities for the volunteers. All right, So all of that was a lot. And the reason that we have only gone over, the reason we've only created OKRs for Q4 and Q1 is because we need help, for one thing, but also because we don't want to define the strategic plan without the community. We want people from all of the programs and bridges and chapters to be helping us come up with what is the next strategic plan? What do we need to be working on going forward? What is our next 3-year plan? And that kind of leads me to our ask, right? So our next steps are, please let us know what you can help us with. I've got a sign-up sheet here for you. So let us know where you're interested in helping. Any help at all is helpful. Like if you're interested in helping just for like a couple of weeks, that's great. If you're interested in, joining one of the board committees, that's great. If you're interested in getting one of the workshops going or getting a bridge going, we basically need anything that you are willing to help us. Sarah reminded me recently that like every little thing someone does is furthering things along, even if it's something very small. It has an impact. It spirals. It's a rolling. It's like a snowball. Like one little thing leads to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, and yeah, we're just super excited to be kind of getting things going again, and like, yeah, I want all of you to come with us and do that with us.